I'm Edgar, 34 and a senior software engineer at a tech firm in Boston. Never thought my engagement night would end with my father's fist connecting with my jaw, blood streaming down my white dress shirt, all because I refused to hand over the $150,000 my grandmother left specifically for my wedding to my gambling-addicted younger brother. The silent room, the shocked faces of our guests, my fiancé's tears, it all blurs together in my memory. But what happened next changed our family forever. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey through betrayal to healing. My grandmother Margaret was the most incredible woman I've ever known. She raised me just as much as my parents did, maybe even more in the ways that truly matter. Every Sunday afternoon was our special time together. We'd work on puzzles, bake her famous apple cinnamon cookies, or just sit on her porch, swing talking about life. She was the one person who always believed in me, who saw my potential even when I doubted myself. "You're going to do amazing things, Edgar," she would tell me, her eyes crinkling at the corners when she smiled. "I see something special in you, a quiet strength that will carry you through life." When I got interested in computers as a teenager, she didn't brush it off as just another phase like my parents did. Instead, she saved up and bought me my first real programming book. She even tried to understand what I was learning, asking questions and listening intently as I explained concepts she couldn't possibly grasp. But she tried anyway. Grandma Margaret passed away 4 years ago at 92. Her mind was sharp until the end, which is why nobody questioned her when she made specific provisions in her will. She left most of her estate to various family members, but there was one special bequest, $150,000 set aside in a trust specifically for my wedding day. Her will was explicit. The money was only to be used for my wedding and starting my married life. She had done something similar for my cousin Jennifer years before. My father, Richard, has always been a successful man by conventional standards, senior vice president at an insurance company, nice house in the suburbs, country club membership. But that success came with expectations that weighed like concrete on my shoulders growing up. Nothing less than straight, as was acceptable. Second place in anything was just the first loser. He pushed me relentlessly, criticizing more than praising. Mom, Linda, is kind but passive. She spent 35 years deferring to Dad, smoothing things over when his temper flares, making excuses for his behavior. I love her deeply, but have always wished she would stand up to him, especially when it came to how differently he treated me and my younger brother, Max. Max. 4 years younger than me, and the golden child from day one. Athletic, charming, and able to talk his way out of any trouble. And there was plenty of trouble. Underage drinking, fender benders with Dad's car, failing classes because he was too busy with his social life. Each time, my parents bailed him out, made excuses, gave him another chance. Meanwhile, I was grounded for a B+ on a calculus test or for coming home 15 minutes after curfew. Despite the different standards, I worked hard to earn my father's approval. I graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to MIT, and built a successful career in software engineering. I bought my own house at 28 and have a retirement account that would make most financial advisors proud. All of it accomplished largely on my own, with emotional support from Grandma Margaret but minimal help from my parents. 3 years ago, I met Rachel at a friend's wedding. She's a pediatric physical therapist with a laugh that fills the room and the kind of empathy that makes every child in her care feel like a superhero. We connected immediately over shared values and similar experiences with demanding parents. On our third date, I knew she was the woman I would marry. Rachel understands me in ways no one else has. She sees the lingering insecurity beneath my confident exterior, the part of me still seeking validation, but instead of exploiting those vulnerabilities, she helps me heal them. For the first time in my life, I found someone who loves me, not for what I achieve, but simply for who I am. After 3 years together, I asked Rachel to marry me on a sunset hike to the spot where we'd had our first kiss. When she said yes, I finally felt like all the pieces of my life were falling into place. We began planning for a June wedding the following year, about 14 months away. I was excited to use my grandmother's gift for the purpose she intended. Rachel and I weren't interested in an extravagant wedding, but we did want something beautiful to celebrate with loved ones. We planned to use part of the money for the wedding and put the rest toward a down payment on a larger home where we could start a family. We'd just booked our venue, a beautiful converted barn on a winery outside the city, when I got a call from Max. His voice sounded strange, strained and panicky, in a way I'd never heard before. "Edgar, I need to talk to you. It's important. Can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the next day. When Max arrived, I barely recognized him. My usually impeccably dressed brother looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling as he clutched his coffee cup. "I'm in trouble, Edgar. Serious trouble," he admitted, after several minutes of uncomfortable small talk. It turned out Max had a gambling problem that had spiraled out of control. What started with friendly poker games had escalated to online sports betting, then casino trips, and finally, high-interest loans from people you don't want to owe money to. He was $140,000 in debt, with threatening messages coming in daily from his creditors. "They're not the kind of people who give extensions, bro," he said, his voice cracking. "They've started mentioning mom and dad. I'm scared." I felt sick to my stomach. Despite our differences, he was still my brother. "We'll figure something out, Max. Maybe we can consolidate the debt, work out a payment plan. I can help you find a good counselor for the gambling." He shook his head impatiently. "You don't get it. I need the money now, all of it." That's when he brought up Grandma Margaret's wedding fund. He knew about it, of course. The whole family did. "You're not even getting married for another year," he argued. "I could be dead by then. This is literally life or death, Edgar." I tried to explain that the money wasn't just mine to give. It was in a trust with specific conditions. Besides, it represented something special between me and Grandma. It was her final gift to me. Max's demeanor changed instantly. The vulnerable, scared brother disappeared, replaced by the entitled kid I'd grown up with. "You always were her favorite," he spat. "And now, you're going to let me suffer because you want some fancy party? Real nice, Edgar. Really shows what kind of person you are." He stormed out, leaving me sitting there stunned. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. It was my father. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he demanded without even a greeting. "Your brother comes to you for help, and you turn your back on him?" I tried to explain my position, but Dad wasn't interested in my side of the story. In his mind, family always came first, except when it came to supporting my dreams or decisions. "That money is just sitting there," he argued. "Your wedding isn't for months. Max needs help now." "It's not my money to just give away," I explained. "Grandma left it specifically for my wedding. It's in a trust." "Don't give me that legal mumbo-jumbo," Dad snapped. "You're looking for excuses. Your mother and I didn't raise you to be selfish." The conversation deteriorated from there. Dad insisted I was choosing money over family. I maintained that helping Max financially without addressing his gambling would just enable him to dig a deeper hole. We ended the call with nothing resolved and a growing rift between us. Mom called later, her voice quivering as she tried to play peacemaker. "Your father's just worried about Max," she explained, making excuses as always. "You know how he gets. Please just think about helping your brother." By the time I hung up, it was clear that my wedding fund had created a family crisis I never saw coming. Rachel held me that night as I struggled with guilt, anger, and confusion. Her support never wavered. "This is our future they're asking you to sacrifice," she reminded me. "And your grandmother wanted this for you. You're not wrong to honor her wishes." As our engagement party approached, the tension with my family showed no signs of easing. Rachel and I had decided on a relatively small gathering at an upscale restaurant downtown, just 50 of our closest friends and family members, to celebrate our upcoming marriage. I spent the days leading up to the event checking and rechecking details, partly because I wanted everything to be perfect for Rachel, but mostly to distract myself from the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Would my family cause a scene? Would Max even show up? Should I have just given him the money to keep the peace? Rachel noticed my distraction as we got dressed for the party. She came up behind me as I struggled with my tie in the mirror, gently turning me to face her. "Whatever happens tonight, we're in this together," she said, fixing my tie with practiced hands. I love you, Edgar. Nothing your family says or does will change that. I took a deep breath, drawing strength from her certainty. I just wanted one night where everyone could be happy for us. I know. But we can't control how others act. Only how we respond, she said, wisdom beyond her 29 years shining through. The pre-party meeting of our families was every bit as awkward as I'd feared. Rachel's parents, Robert and Catherine, were warm, straightforward people who owned a successful landscaping business. They'd welcomed me into their family from day one, appreciating my stability and genuine love for their daughter. My parents arrived exactly on time, their smiles not quite reaching their eyes as they exchanged pleasantries with the Clarks. Mom hugged me tight, whispering, "Please be reasonable tonight," in my ear before pulling away. Dad's handshake was firm but brief, his usual criticisms about my appearance or career notably absent, replaced by something worse, cold disappointment. I was just beginning to hope we might make it through the evening without incident when Max arrived, 45 minutes late and looking unwell. He'd made an effort with his appearance, but couldn't hide the dark circles under his eyes, or the way he kept checking his phone nervously. While Rachel was showing her parents to their seats, I pulled Max aside. "Can we talk for a minute?" I asked, leading him to a quiet corner. "If you're going to lecture me, save it," he muttered. "I'm not. I just wanted to say that I am willing to help you," I said carefully. "I can give you $30,000 from my savings, and I can help you work out a plan for the rest. I know some people who—" "$30,000? Max interrupted with a bitter laugh. "That's not going to cut it, and you know it. It's what I can do, Max. The rest of the money isn't accessible. Dad says otherwise." He cut in again. "He says you're just being difficult, that you could help if you wanted to." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, Dad says? Have you two been discussing this behind my back?" Max looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. "He said he'd handle it, that he'd make you see reason tonight." Before I could ask what exactly that meant, Rachel called us over. The party was starting, and guests were arriving. I plastered on a smile, while my mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. The restaurant's private dining room looked beautiful. Soft lighting from crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables decorated with arrangements of white roses and greenery. A string quartet played quietly in the corner. Under different circumstances, it would have been the perfect setting to celebrate our love. For the first hour, everything went surprisingly well. We mingled with guests, accepted congratulations, and shared the story of our engagement multiple times. Rachel glowed with happiness, and I began to think maybe I had misunderstood Max's warning. Then it was time for the formal part of the evening, the toast and the ring exchange that would officially announce our engagement. Rachel's father spoke first, a heartfelt welcome to me as his future son-in-law that brought tears to many eyes in the room. I took Rachel's hand, slipped the diamond ring onto her finger, and spoke from my heart about how she had changed my life. "Before I met Rachel, I thought I knew what success was," I said, looking only at her. "But she showed me that real success isn't measured in achievements or bank accounts. It's measured in moments of genuine connection and love. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life collecting those moments with you." We sealed our commitment with a kiss as the room erupted in applause. It was perfect, until my father stood up, tapping his glass for attention. "I'd also like to say a few words," he announced, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he typically reserved for board meetings. I felt Rachel's hand tighten around mine as Dad began speaking. He started well enough, reminiscing about my childhood and welcoming Rachel to the family. But there was an edge to his voice that made me increasingly uneasy. "Family has always been the cornerstone of our values," he continued, his gaze hardening as he looked directly at me. "And in our family, we believe in supporting each other through thick and thin, no matter what." The room grew quiet, sensing the shift in tone. "Which is why I'm sure Edgar will want to make an announcement tonight," Dad continued, "about how he plans to use his grandmother's generous gift to help his brother out of a difficult situation, rather than spending it all on a single day's celebration." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rachel's parents exchanged confused glances. I felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger. "Dad, this isn't the time or place," I said firmly, standing up. "When is the time, Edgar? When your brother is in the hospital? Or worse?" His voice rose. "You're sitting on $150,000 while Max is desperate." "Richard," my mother attempted to intervene, placing a hand on his arm that he immediately shook off. The room had gone completely silent now, 50 pairs of eyes bouncing between my father and me like spectators at a tennis match. "That money was left to me by Grandma specifically for my wedding," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not even accessible for other purposes." "Don't lie to these good people," Dad snapped. "Trusts can be broken. You're choosing not to help your own blood." "I've offered to help Max in other ways," I said, feeling my control slipping. "But I won't enable his gambling addiction by handing over Grandma's gift." "Addiction? How dare you?" Dad bellowed. "Your brother made some mistakes. He doesn't need your judgment. He needs your help." "Richard, please." Mom tried again, her voice trembling. "No, Linda. It's time. Someone taught our son about family loyalty." Dad turned back to me, his face reddening. "Right here, right now. Edgar, either you announce that you're going to help your brother with that money, or I can't support this engagement." Rachel stood beside me, her hands steady in mine despite the chaos. "Mr. Thompson, with all due respect, this is our engagement party. Maybe we could discuss family finances another time." Her calm intervention seemed to push my father over the edge. He slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "There won't be another time. Either he commits to helping Max tonight, or this engagement is over as far as I'm concerned." I felt something inside me harden. "No," I said simply. "What did you say to me?" Dad's voice dropped dangerously low. I said no. I won't be blackmailed, not even by you. Not tonight. Not ever again. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened next. My father, the man who coached my Little League team, who taught me to drive, who I had spent my whole life trying to please, lunged across the table and punched me square in the face. Pain exploded across my cheekbone. I staggered backward, tasting blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. Someone screamed, "Rachel, maybe," or my mother. Time seemed to slow down as I regained my balance, reaching up to feel warm blood trickling from my nose. The shock in the room was palpable. My father stood frozen, perhaps as surprised by his actions as everyone else. And in that moment, with everyone watching, I straightened my spine, pulled a handkerchief from my pocket, and carefully wiped the blood from my face. The silence in that restaurant was deafening. The string quartet had stopped playing mid-note. Waiters stood like statues along the walls, unsure whether to intervene or disappear. Rachel's mother had her hand pressed against her mouth in horror, while her father looked ready to leap across the room at mine. Blood continued to drip from my nose onto my white shirt, blooming into small crimson flowers against the fabric. I could feel my eye beginning to swell where my father's knuckles had connected with my cheekbone. Yet strangely, I felt calmer than I had in weeks, maybe even years. "Edgar," Rachel whispered, pressing her napkin gently against my face. Her hands were steady, but I could see the fury in her eyes. Not directed at me, but at the man who had raised me. Dad stood rigid, his chest heaving. For a split second, I thought I saw regret flash across his face, but it was quickly replaced by the stubborn pride I knew all too well. Max sat frozen beside him, his face pale with shock. "Everyone can see the kind of son I've raised," Dad announced to the room, his voice strained. "Selfish to the core, willing to let his own brother suffer to have a fancy party." That's when I decided enough was enough. A lifetime of seeking approval, of accepting the Edgar, is less than Mac's narrative, of making myself smaller to keep the peace. It all ended in that moment. "I'd like everyone's attention, please," I said, my voice surprisingly strong despite the throbbing pain in my face. "Since my father has chosen to make our private family matter public, I think you all deserve to hear the whole truth." I moved to the center of the room, Rachel's hand firmly in mine. My grandmother Margaret was one of the most important people in my life. When she passed away, she left me this money specifically for my wedding day, with clear legal stipulations about its use. This wasn't a random choice. She did it because she knew how much finding a loving partnership meant to me, and she wanted to give me a start in that new chapter of life. I looked around the room, making eye contact with friends and family members who had come to celebrate with us. "My brother Max has a gambling addiction," I continued, feeling him shrink in his seat at my words. It's not the first time he's been in financial trouble, though it is by far the worst. Dad is right about one thing. Family should support each other. What he didn't tell you is that I've been supporting Max for years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as I revealed this information. My father's face registered genuine surprise. He clearly hadn't known. 3 years ago, when Max crashed his car while driving under the influence, I paid for the repairs and the lawyer who kept it off his record. 2 years ago, when he lost his job and couldn't make rent, I covered him for 6 months. Last year, when he had his first gambling debt of $20,000, I paid it off on the condition he would get help. I turned to look directly at my brother. I don't say this to embarrass you, Max. I say it because I love you, and I've been trying to help you in ways that actually address the real problem. Giving you $150,000 now won't solve anything. It will just postpone the inevitable and dishonor Grandma's final gift to me. Max couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his hands, shoulders hunched in defeat. Mom was openly crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. I hadn't told her about helping Max either. I'd kept it between us brothers to spare her the worry. I won't be using Grandma's gift to bail Max out, I stated firmly. But that doesn't mean I won't help my brother. Dad's face darkened again. You stand there bleeding and still refuse to do the right thing? After everything your mother and I have done for you? Richard. My mother's voice cut through the tension like a whip. I'd never heard her speak to my father that way. That's enough. Our son is trying to tell us something important, and for once in your life, you're going to listen. Dad looked as shocked as I felt at her sudden backbone. He sank back into his chair, momentarily silenced. I continued, what I was going to say is that I've already made arrangements at a treatment center for gambling addiction in Vermont. They have a bed waiting for Max whenever he's ready. I'll cover the cost from my own savings, not Grandma's money. Because that's what family really does. They help each other heal, not enable destructive patterns. I looked at Max, who had finally raised his head to meet my gaze. The choice is yours, brother. Real help, or another temporary bailout that leads nowhere. But I won't be the one providing the latter. Not this time. Rachel stepped forward, wrapping her arm around my waist in silent support. I love Edgar, she addressed the room, her voice clear and strong. I love his compassion, his integrity, and his courage, which all of you are witnessing tonight. Our wedding will proceed as planned, with or without certain family members' blessing, and we will use my grandmother-in-law's gift exactly as she intended, to honor her memory and her love for her grandson. Her father stood up next, his expression thunderous as he faced my dad. I don't know what kind of man hits his own son at his engagement party, but I know I don't want him anywhere near my daughter. I think you should leave, Mr. Thompson. Bob, Rachel's mother, began, always the diplomat. No, Catherine. Some lines can't be crossed, he insisted firmly. My father looked around the room, seemingly realizing for the first time how his actions appeared to others. The powerful businessman, used to commanding respect, was now being viewed as nothing more than a bully. This isn't over, he muttered. But the threat in his voice had diminished. He threw his napkin on the table and stormed toward the exit. Mom hesitated, torn between following her husband and staying with her son. Go, Mom, I said gently. We'll talk tomorrow. After my parents left, most guests followed suit, murmuring awkward apologies and congratulations in equal measure. The joyful celebration we'd planned had been thoroughly destroyed. As the room emptied, Max remained seated, looking lost. When only the immediate family remained, he finally approached me. Is it true? He asked quietly. About the treatment center? I nodded. The director's expecting your call. They specialize in gambling addiction and have an excellent success rate. He swallowed hard. I don't deserve your help. Probably not, I agreed with unexpected frankness. But you're getting it anyway. That's what family really means, Max. For the first time in years, I saw genuine remorse in my brother's eyes. I'm sorry about your face and everything else. Me too, I said simply. Now go home and think about what you want your life to look like a year from now. The treatment center or more of the same. It's your choice. After Max left, Rachel's parents insisted on taking us to the emergency room to check my face. The doctor confirmed nothing was broken, just bruised. As we drove home afterward, Rachel held my hand tightly. "Are you okay?" she asked, studying my battered face in the glow of passing streetlights. I thought about her question carefully before answering. Strangely, yes. For the first time in my life, I feel like I stood up for myself instead of trying to please everyone else. "It hurts," I gestured to my face, "but something else feels like it's finally healing." The morning after the disastrous engagement party, I woke up to 27 missed calls and over 40 text messages. Most were from concerned friends and family who had witnessed the previous night's drama. 3 were from my mother, her messages becoming increasingly frantic. None were from my father. Rachel brought me coffee and an ice pack for my bruised face, sitting beside me on the bed as I scrolled through the notifications. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I set the phone down, considering. I think I need some space from my parents right now. Max too, until he decides whether he wants real help. "I support whatever you need," she assured me. "But for what it's worth, I'm incredibly proud of how you handled last night." We spent the weekend in a protective bubble, ignoring the outside world as we recalibrated. By Monday, I knew I needed to take concrete steps to secure our future and address the family crisis. My first call was to the family attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate. "Yes, your father has been inquiring about the trust," Mr. Goldstein confirmed when I asked. I explained to him, as I'm telling you now, that the terms are ironclad. Margaret was very specific about her wishes. "And there's no way for them to force me to use the money for Max?" I asked. "None whatsoever. The money is in trust for your wedding and establishing your marital home as specified. Any other use would violate the terms and could potentially void the trust entirely, with the money reverting to the estate." That confirmation gave me the confidence to move forward with my plan. After work that day, I visited the rehabilitation center I'd researched for Max. The director, Dr. Harris, walked me through their program and payment options. I put down a deposit to hold a place for my brother, good for the next 30 days. My next stop was more difficult, my parents' house. I wasn't ready to see my father, but I was worried about my mother. I timed my visit for when I knew Dad would be at work. Mom opened the door and immediately burst into tears at the sight of my bruised face. "Oh, Edgar," she sobbed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so sorry. So sorry." I let her cry, understanding she was apologizing for more than just my father's violence. She was apologizing for years of failing to protect me from his favoritism and criticism. We sat in the kitchen where I'd grown up, the familiar smell of her cinnamon tea filling the air. For the first time in my adult life, my mother really talked to me. Not about mundane things or family news, but about her own struggles. "I've enabled your father's behavior for too long," she admitted, her hands cupping her mug tightly. "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was really just teaching you and Max that his treatment was acceptable." "Why did you stay with him all these years?" I asked the question that had puzzled me since childhood. Mom sighed deeply. "I loved him, still do, though right now I can hardly look at him, and there were good times, especially early on. But mainly, I was afraid. Your father controlled the money, my social life, everything. The longer I stayed, the harder it seemed to leave." Her candor surprised me. "And now? Now I'm 63 years old and wondering if I've wasted my life being someone's shadow," she said with a sad smile. "Watching him hit you, something broke inside me, Edgar. I can't unsee it, and I can't excuse it. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I've opened my own bank account for the first time in 40 years. And I told your father he needs therapy if he wants this marriage to continue." I was stunned. My meek, accommodating mother had found her voice at last. Perhaps my standing up to Dad had given her permission to do the same. "I'm proud of you, Mom," I said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "I'm the one who's proud," she insisted, tears welling again. "You became a good man despite our mistakes, not because of our guidance. And what you've done for Max over the years, I had no idea." We talked for hours, really talked, about painful truths we'd both spent years avoiding. When I finally left, something had shifted between us. My mother was no longer just the woman who had failed to protect me. She was a person with her own struggles, trying to find her way toward a better life. The next week brought unexpected news. Max called, his voice steadier than it had been in months. "I talked to that Dr. Harris," he said. "I'm checking in tomorrow." Relief washed over me. "That's great, Max. Really great. I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, vulnerability replacing his usual bravado. "But I know I can't keep going the way I have been." "You can do it," I assured him. "And you won't be alone. I'll visit when you're allowed to have visitors." "Why are you helping me after everything?" he asked, the question that had clearly been weighing on him. "Because you're my brother," I said simply, "and because I believe you can be more than your worst mistakes." As Max began his 90-day treatment program, Rachel and I resumed our wedding planning. We decided to scale back some of our original ideas, not because we had to financially, but because the recent events had clarified what really mattered to us. We wanted a celebration focused on genuine connection with the people who truly supported our relationship, not an elaborate show. 3 weeks after the engagement party, my father finally reached out, a terse text asking if we could meet for lunch. I suggested a public restaurant, partly for neutral territory, partly because I wasn't entirely sure he wouldn't try to hit me again. When I arrived, I was surprised to find him already seated, looking diminished somehow. The commanding presence he'd always projected seemed muted, his shoulders slightly stooped. "Thank you for coming," he said formally as I sat down across from him. I nodded but said nothing, waiting. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your mother insisted I get help. I've seen a therapist twice now." Coming from my father, who had always dismissed therapy as nonsense for weak people, this was a remarkable admission. "I've been thinking about things," he continued haltingly, "about the kind of father I've been, the kind of man I am." I remained silent, unwilling to make this easy for him. "What I did at your engagement party was unforgivable," he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never struck anyone in anger before, let alone my own son. I'm deeply ashamed." The word ashamed from my father's lips was so unexpected that I nearly asked him to repeat it. Richard Thompson didn't do shame or regret. He justified, rationalized, but never admitted fault. "Why did you do it?" I asked, needing to understand. He stared down at his untouched water glass. "I've asked myself that same question every day since," the therapist thinks. "She thinks I've been compensating for my own father's neglect by overprotecting Max. That I saw too much of myself in you, your self-sufficiency, your success without my help, and it threatened me somehow." "That doesn't explain punching me at my engagement party," I pointed out. "No, it doesn't," he agreed. "That was pure loss of control. When you stood up to me in front of everyone, contradicting my version of events, exposing Max's problems that I'd tried so hard to hide, I just snapped. It's not an excuse. There is no excuse." I studied my father's face, the face I'd both feared and sought approval from my entire life. For the first time, I saw uncertainty there, vulnerability even. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I told him honestly. "But I'm willing to try, on one condition." "Name it," he said immediately. "Respect my boundaries. My life with Rachel, my career choices, my decisions about my own money, including Grandma's gift, they're mine to make. Not open for debate or criticism." Dad nodded slowly. "I'm learning that I don't have the right to control my adult children's lives. It's an adjustment." "How's that therapy working out?" I asked, allowing a small smile. "It's awful," he admitted with a grimace. "Having someone point out your flaws for an hour straight? Pure torture. But your mother says it's that or divorce, so here we are." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, not by a long shot, but it was a start, a crack in the wall of resentment and misunderstanding that had separated us for years. As we awkwardly parted ways after lunch, my father hesitated, then asked, "How's Max doing?" "Really? He's doing the work," I answered truthfully. "It's hard, but he's committed. You should visit him when he's allowed to have family sessions. He needs you too." Dad nodded, a mixture of grief and hope crossing his face. "I'll do that. And Edgar, thank you for helping him when I couldn't see what he really needed." Those words, acknowledgement, gratitude, meant more coming from my father than they would have from anyone else. I drove home feeling lighter somehow, as if a burden I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it was there had finally begun to lift. The weeks following my confrontation with my father brought changes I never could have anticipated. Mom called frequently, updating me on her newfound independence. She'd joined a book club, reconnected with old friends, and even taken a part-time job at a local florist shop, something she'd always wanted to do but Dad had discouraged. I'm discovering who Linda Thompson is, outside of being Richard's wife, she told me during one of our calls. It's terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Dad was keeping his word about therapy, though Mom reported he still came home from each session in a foul mood. But he's trying, she insisted. That counts for something. Max was making steady progress at the rehabilitation center. When I visited him after his first month, the change was remarkable. The nervous energy and false bravado were gone, replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful demeanor. I never realized how much of my identity was wrapped up in being the fun guy, the life of the party, he reflected as we walked the center's peaceful grounds. Gambling gave me that rush, that feeling of being special when I won. But underneath, I was miserable. When did it start? I asked, realizing I'd never known the true extent of his problem. College, probably. Small stuff at first, poker nights, sports bets with friends. But after I dropped out and started working those dead-end jobs, it became an escape, a way to feel like I could still win at life, even when everything else was falling apart. He stopped walking, turning to face me directly. I've been jealous of you for as long as I can remember. You always knew what you wanted, always had your act together. Dad pushed you hard, but at least he believed you could achieve something. With me, it was always excuses and bailouts, like deep down he knew I'd never amount to much. The honesty of his words struck me. I'd spent years envying the way our parents, especially Dad, doted on Max, never realizing he might have been envying me for the very pressure I resented. For what it's worth, I told him, I always thought you got the better deal. Dad expected perfection from me and gave me hell when I fell short. With you, he was always quick to forgive. Max shook his head. He forgave because he expected me to fail. That's not love, Edgar. That's pity. We continued walking in silence, both processing this new understanding of our shared childhood from opposite perspectives. The counselors here say, I need to make amends, Max said eventually. I owe you so much, not just money, but for the pain I've caused. I don't even know where to start. Start by getting better, I said simply. That's all I want from you right now. Back home, Rachel had become my rock through all the family turbulence. She listened without judgment as I worked through complicated feelings about my parents and brother. She held me on the nights when suppressed anger or grief would suddenly surface, leaving me shaken. I never had a healthy model for what family should be. I confessed one evening as we lay in bed. I'm scared I'll repeat the patterns, that I'll somehow turn into my father once we have kids. Rachel propped herself up on one elbow, looking at me intently. The fact that you're worried about it means you won't. You're already breaking the cycle, Edgar. Look at how you're handling things with your family now. Setting boundaries, offering real help, instead of enabling, standing your ground without becoming cruel. Those aren't your father's tools. Her faith in me was healing in itself. Slowly, I began to believe that the future could be different from the past. Wedding plans continued to evolve. We decided on a smaller ceremony at a historic lighthouse on the coast, with just 70 guests instead of the original 120. When Rachel suggested we use part of my grandmother's fund to establish a scholarship in her name for students studying computer science, my passion, it felt like the perfect way to honor her memory beyond just our wedding day. She'd love that, I agreed, picturing Grandma Margaret's proud smile. Helping others pursue education was so important to her. 2 months after the engagement party incident, we received an unexpected package. Inside was a handcrafted wooden box with intricate inlay work, along with a note from my father. Made this in the woodworking class your mother insisted I take to channel my emotions constructively. Thought it might hold wedding cards or something. No pressure to use it, Dad. It was awkward and imperfect, but it was an effort. A physical manifestation of my father attempting to change deeply ingrained patterns. Rachel placed it on our mantel, squeezing my hand as we both recognized the significance of the gesture. Max completed his 90-day program and transitioned to outpatient treatment. He found a job at a local tech company in their customer service department. Modest work compared to his previous sales positions, but stable and structured in a way that supported his recovery. He began making small payments toward the money I'd spent on his treatment, insisting on repaying me despite my assurances that it wasn't necessary. "It's not about the money," he explained. "It's about taking responsibility for once in my life." 3 months after our engagement party disaster, Dad reached out again, asking if Rachel and I would join him and Mom for dinner. It would be the first time the 4 of us had been together since that night. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Rachel asked as we drove to the restaurant. "No," I admitted, "but I think it's time to try." As we walked in, I spotted my parents already seated at a corner table. Dad stood when he saw us, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. Mom beamed, clearly thrilled at this attempt at reconciliation. "Thank you both for coming," Dad said formally as we sat down. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone carefully avoiding sensitive topics. But as the meal progressed, the tension gradually eased. Rachel, bless her heart, had a gift for drawing people out, asking Mom about her new job, and Dad about his woodworking projects. Over dessert, Dad cleared his throat, setting down his fork with deliberate care. "I've been wanting to tell you both something," he said. "Your mother and I have been discussing your wedding, and, well, we'd like to contribute. If you'll let us." I glanced at Mom, who nodded encouragingly. "That's generous, but not necessary," I began carefully. "We have Grandma's gift, and we've scaled back our plans anyway." "It's not about necessity," Dad said, echoing Max's words about his repayment. "It's about showing our support. In a way I should have from the beginning." I felt Rachel's hand slip into mine under the table, giving me a gentle squeeze of encouragement. "We'd be honored," I said finally, accepting the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you." As we prepared to leave, Dad asked to speak with me privately for a moment. We stepped outside while Mom and Rachel settled the bill. "I got a call from the treatment center," he said without preamble. "They suggested a family program for those of us supporting someone in recovery. Your mother and I are going next weekend." "That's great, Dad," I said, genuinely impressed by his commitment. "I should have recognized Max's problem years ago," he continued, regret heavy in his voice. "Instead, I enabled him while demanding perfection from you. I set both my sons up for different kinds of failure." "We're all still here," I pointed out, "still trying. That counts for something." Dad nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Your grandmother's money, is it really that important that it only go to the wedding?" "I'm not suggesting giving it to Max," he added quickly. "I'm just trying to understand." I considered the question seriously. It's not about the money itself. It's about honoring her wishes, yes, but it's more than that. It's about finally standing up for myself and what I believe is right, even when it's difficult. That's the real gift she gave me. Not the money, but the confidence that I'm worth fighting for. My father studied me for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "You're a better man than I raised you to be," he said finally. "That's to your credit, not mine." It wasn't a Hallmark movie ending. There were still awkward moments, painful memories, and trust to rebuild. But as Rachel and I drove home that night, I felt a sense of cautious optimism that my family might actually heal from this crisis. Not by returning to what we were before, but by becoming something healthier, something new. 6 months after the engagement party that changed everything, Rachel and I stood together at the lighthouse we'd chosen for our wedding venue. The ceremony was still 3 weeks away, but we'd come to finalize details with the coordinator. As we watched waves crash against the rocky shore below, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. "Hard to believe how much has changed," I said, pulling Rachel close against the brisk ocean breeze. "This time last year, I was still trying to be the perfect son, still walking on eggshells around my father. And now?" she prompted, tilting her face up to mine. "Now I'm just trying to be the best version of myself. For you, for me, for whatever family we create together." The path to healing with my parents had not been straight or easy. There were setbacks, uncomfortable family dinners, old patterns resurfacing, moments when it seemed easier to retreat back into our established roles. But there was also progress, real, measurable change, that sometimes left me breathless with its unexpectedness. My father had continued his therapy, extending it beyond the initial ultimatum from my mother. The man who once dismissed mental health support as weakness now reluctantly admitted it had some merit. High praise indeed, coming from Richard Thompson. More significant than his words were his actions. He'd stopped offering unsolicited career advice every time we spoke. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When we discussed wedding details, he deferred to our choices without criticism. Mom had blossomed in ways I never imagined possible. She'd expanded her part-time job at the florist's to include designing arrangements, discovering a creative talent long suppressed. She spoke up during conversations, disagreed with Dad openly but respectfully, and had rekindled friendships that had withered under the shadow of her controlling marriage. "I spent decades disappearing into your father's life," she told me over coffee one afternoon. "I thought that's what a good wife did. Now I realize a good partnership means both people remain whole." Max's journey had perhaps been the most profound transformation. 8 months sober, he'd developed a quiet dignity that suited him far better than his former frenetic charm. He'd been promoted at work, started dating a kind, steady woman from his support group, and was taking night classes to finish his long-abandoned business degree. "I'm trying to build something real this time," he explained, when I expressed admiration for his efforts. Not just the appearance of success, but something with a foundation. He'd also insisted on being involved in our wedding planning in a meaningful way. Rather than serve as a traditional groomsman, he'd offered to coordinate the transportation for elderly guests and manage some of the day of logistics. "I want to be useful, not just decorative," he'd said with the self-deprecating humor that had replaced his former bravado. Our wedding day arrived bright and clear, the October sky a brilliant blue above the lighthouse. I stood in a small room preparing with my groomsmen, adjusting my tie for the third time, when there was a knock at the door. "Got a minute?" My father stood in the doorway, already dressed in his formal suit. The groomsmen tactfully found reasons to step out, leaving us alone. "You look good," Dad said awkwardly. "Nervous?" "Not about marrying Rachel," I replied honestly. "Maybe a little about everything going smoothly." Dad nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I wanted to give you something before the ceremony." He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of cufflinks I recognized immediately, my grandfather's, the ones he'd worn on his own wedding day 65 years ago. "Dad, these are your special occasion cufflinks. You never let anyone touch them. They should be yours now," he said simply. Then, with visible effort, he added, "I'm proud of you, Edgar. Not because of your job or your accomplishments, though those are impressive. I'm proud of the man you've become, your integrity, your compassion, the way you've helped your brother when I couldn't see what he really needed." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. In 34 years, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd said he was proud of me, and never without qualification. "I haven't been the father you deserved," he continued, his voice roughening with emotion. "I pushed too hard in some ways, not enough in others. I favored Max because he reminded me of myself at my worst, insecure, desperate for validation. And I projected my own fears onto you because you reminded me of who I wished I could be." I felt something shift inside me, a knot of resentment loosening after being pulled tight for decades. "I forgive you, Dad," I said, the words emerging more easily than I'd expected. "We can't change the past, but we're doing better now. That's what matters." The ceremony itself was everything Rachel and I had hoped for. Intimate, meaningful, focused on the commitment we were making, rather than on extravagant displays. When I saw her walking toward me in her simple but elegant gown, the lighthouse behind her and the ocean beyond, I felt a certainty that transcended all the family drama of the past year. During the reception, I watched my family with new eyes. Mom dancing with her friends, laughing freely. Dad having an actual conversation with Rachel's father, neither man dominating or posturing. Max sober and attentive, making sure my grandmother's sister had everything she needed at her table. We were broken in many ways, still healing in others, but we were trying. That counted for something, maybe for everything. When it came time for toasts, my father stood, glass in hand. A moment I'd once dreaded but now awaited with curious hope. "When I think about what love means," he began, his voice steady, "I used to focus on grand gestures and provision, being the breadwinner, the protector, the decision maker. What Edgar has taught me, through his example rather than his words, is that real love is often quieter than that. It's in the boundaries we respect, the truth we tell even when it's difficult, the support we offer without controlling the outcome. He turned to face Rachel and me directly. My son and his bride embody a kind of partnership I'm only beginning to understand, one based on mutual respect and genuine acceptance. May your marriage be everything mine should have been, and may you continue to teach this old dog new tricks about what love really means. Later, as Rachel and I shared our first dance, I held her close, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me through all of this," I whispered against her hair. "That's what partners do," she replied simply. "We face things together." Looking around the room at the people who had weathered this storm with us, I realized that the painful confrontation at our engagement party hadn't destroyed my family, as I'd feared. It had created the opportunity for something more authentic to emerge from the rubble of our carefully maintained facade. The scar on my cheekbone from my father's blow had faded to a faint line, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. The emotional wounds had begun to heal too, not by pretending they'd never existed, but by acknowledging them, cleaning them properly, and giving them the time and care they needed. My grandmother's gift had served its purpose, not just financing our wedding day, but catalyzing a family transformation that might never have happened otherwise. In fighting to honor her wishes, I had finally learned to honor myself. As the evening drew to a close, I found a quiet moment to slip away to the lighthouse balcony. Looking out over the darkened ocean, I could almost feel my grandmother's presence beside me. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the sea breeze, "for everything. The wounds on my face have healed, but the lesson from that day will stay with me forever. Sometimes, to save the people you love, you must have the courage to say no and the strength to endure their anger. True healing begins not when we sacrifice our boundaries, but when we learn to stand firmly within them, extending compassion without surrendering our self-respect." What about you? Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure to do what you knew was right, or found yourself torn between helping someone and enabling them? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges and personal growth. Thank you for coming along with me through one of the most difficult and ultimately transformative chapters of my life. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments lead to our greatest healing.